So, I got something super interesting for you today, Adrian. Like, seriously mind-blowing stuff. It's about probably the most famous cold case in history. And there's been this huge breakthrough.
That's right, and it's just incredible because we're talking about Jack the Ripper here, right? Like after 130 years, we might finally, actually know who this person was.
Wait, you're telling me they actually figured it out?
Well, that's the thing. We've got some really, really compelling DNA evidence that's just come to light, and it's kind of, changing everything we thought we knew about the case.
This is gonna be a wild one for Unsolved and Unhinged, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Like we're talking about potentially solving one of the most notorious, like the most infamous serial killer cases in history. And the evidence, it's absolutely fascinating.
So, before we get into this breakthrough, we should probably talk about the actual murders, right? Like, what exactly happened back then?
Oh yeah, right. So we're talking about 1888 in Whitechapel, London. And and it was just absolutely terrifying time. There were five victims that we know for sure were connected. Like they're called the canonical five.
5 victims. That's, quite specific. How do they know these were definitely connected?
Well, these were all women who lived in London's East End, and they were specifically sex workers. The killer had this really distinct way of, killing his victims. We're talking about throat slashings and some really brutal stuff with internal organs being removed.
Oh man, that's seriously dark.
Yeah, and the thing is, these women, their names were Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. Like, it's really important to remember these weren't just victims. They were real people.
So, how did he actually get the name Jack the Ripper?
That's actually a really interesting part of the whole thing. So in 1888, right, the police got this letter and it was called the Dear Boss letter because that's how it started. The writer basically, like, he called himself Jack the Ripper for the first time.
Wait, was that actually from the killer though?
Well, that's the thing. A lot of people think, and there's pretty good evidence that it might have actually been written by a journalist just trying to sell more newspapers. Like there were actually quite a few letters sent to the police claiming to be from the Ripper. But most of them were probably fake.
Um, so I've always wondered, like, who were the main suspects? There must have been some theories, right?
Oh man, this is actually really fascinating because, they had some pretty wild theories. Like one of the biggest suspects was actually, and I'm not even kidding here, Prince Albert Victor, who was Queen Victoria's grandson.
Wait, what? A prince. That's quite something.
Right? And the whole theory came about in the 1970s when this British doctor, Thomas Stahl, he came out saying that Prince Albert, or Eddie as they called him, might have been killing people because he had syphilis that was like driving him mad?
Oh, wow. But obviously that wasn't true.
Well, here's the thing. Prince Albert actually died from influenza in 1892, and and it's interesting because the murders kind of stopped around that time. But there wasn't any real evidence connecting him to the crimes.
Were there any other, surprising suspects?
Oh yeah, and this one's even more wild. Like in 1996, this author Richard Wallace actually suggested that Lewis Carroll, the guy who wrote Alice in Wonderland, might have been the Ripper. He even wrote this whole book about it.
Lewis Carroll. That's completely unexpected.
Yeah, and the thing that really stands out is that a lot of these early theories focused on people with medical knowledge because, three of the victims had their internal organs removed in this really like precise way. The killer definitely knew what they were doing with a knife, right? So they thought maybe it was someone with surgical experience.
That makes way more sense than, children's book authors.
Exactly. And that's actually going to be really important when we talk about the new evidence because, well, let's just say the surgical angle might not have been too far off.
So, who's this Kosminski person I keep hearing about in connection with the case?
Oh man, this is where things get really, really interesting. So Aaron Kosminski, right? He was this Polish immigrant who moved to Whitechapel in 1881. And the crazy thing is, he was actually working as a barber surgeon in the area during the time of the murders.
A barber surgeon? That's an interesting combination.
Yeah, and like this is super important because remember what I was saying about the killer needing anatomical knowledge? Well, barber surgeons back then, they actually had some medical training, right? They weren't just cutting hair, they were doing basic surgical procedures too.
That's pretty wild. But what makes them so sure about him now?
So this historian, Russell Edwards, he got his hands on this shawl, right? And not just any shawl. This was actually found at Catherine Eddowes' murder scene. And get this, when they did DNA testing on it, they found a 100% match to Kosminski's DNA, like a perfect match.
Whoa, that seems pretty definitive.
And here's where it gets even more interesting. They found these old documents from the asylum where Kosminski was staying, right? And they literally described him as having strong homicidal tendencies. Like the officials at the time even considered him a strong suspect in the Ripper case.
Wait, he was in an asylum.
Yeah, he actually died there in 1919. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and get this, he was only 23 years old when the murders happened. And you know what's really fascinating? The timing of everything it just fits perfectly, you know what I mean? Like when he was institutionalized, the killing stopped.
Um, so what's actually happening with the investigation now? Like, are they still looking into it?
Oh my gosh, yes. So, like Russell Edwards, right? He's been absolutely relentless with this investigation. And the thing is, he's not just working on his own anymore. The really exciting part is that Catherine Eddowes' great-great-great-granddaughter, Karen Miller, she's actually joined the fight,
There's still family involved. That's that's pretty incredible.
right? And they're not just sitting around, you know? They're actually pushing for something really big. They want Britain's High Court to hold a formal inquest into all this evidence. Like they want to make it official, you know what I mean?
What's the pushback been like?
Well, that's where things get a bit complicated. See, back in 2019, there were these scientists, right? Walter Parson and Hansi Weissensteiner from Innsbruck Medical University, and they were like really skeptical about the whole thing. They had some concerns about how the shawl was stored, and they weren't totally convinced about the testing methods.
Oh, so the evidence isn't completely solid.
Well, here's the thing. They've actually made progress since then. Like they've managed to get DNA samples from Kosminski's actual living relatives. His brother's great-great-granddaughter actually provided a genetic sample. And Karen Miller, she made this really powerful statement to the Daily Mail, saying something like, "We've got the proof now. We just need this inquest to legally name the killer." Because, you know, it's not just about solving a mystery anymore. It's about justice for these victims who've been waiting for over 130 years.
Um, so what you're saying is that we might actually be close to solving one of the biggest mysteries in true crime history.
You know what? Yeah, like we really might be. And the thing that gets me so excited about this is that it's not just about putting a name to Jack the Ripper anymore. It's about, you know, bringing some kind of closure to this dark chapter in London's history,
It's pretty wild to think that after all this time.
right? And the really fascinating thing about this whole situation is that it could totally change how we look at historical cold cases. Like the fact that we can use modern DNA testing to solve something from the 1800s, that's absolutely mind-blowing, you know what I mean?
Wow. Are there other cases that could be solved this way?
Oh man, absolutely. Like this could open up so many possibilities for other unsolved historical cases. And the thing is, it really shows that no case is ever truly cold as long as we've got evidence preserved and, you know, the determination to keep looking for answers.
Um, Definitely gives hope to other families still waiting for answers.
Exactly. And that's really what Unsolved and Unhinged is all about, right? Like keeping these stories alive and showing that even after more than a century, justice might still be possible. You just need the right evidence, the right technology, and people who just won't give up until they get to the truth.
And that's another case brought one step closer to the truth. If you have theories, insights, or just want to keep the conversation going, reach out to us on the comments section. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. It helps us keep shining a light on the cases that still need solving.
Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious.
And never stop searching for the truth.